Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I am San Mateo Mayor Eric Rodriguez, and I want to thank you so much for being here with us this evening. I'm also joined by my son, Tyler, who is going to kick things off by leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Hi everyone, please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Tyler. Awesome job. Tonight, I am pleased to present San Mateo's State of the City for 2021. And while delivering this annual presentation is really one of the highlights and honors of serving as your mayor, I truly wish I was able to deliver this to you all in person. This will actually be the first virtual State of the City in San Mateo's 126-year history. I would first like to recognize my fellow City Council colleagues who are joining us here virtually, Deputy Mayor Rick Bonilla and Council members Diane Pappen, Amarantz Lee, and Joe Goethals. And here's a rough outline of the topics that I want to cover this evening. First, we are going to review some of the COVID-related challenges that we faced this past year, and I want to give you an update on the status of our budget. Next, we are going to talk about the work that's gone on both behind the scenes and on the ground to address the pandemic. We will then review the progress that we have made on longstanding priorities, infrastructure projects, and goals that we had long before COVID arrived. Then we are going to talk about our path forward and how our resilience, both at the individual level and as a community, will pave the way for our recovery. And lastly, there will be a short question and answer session at the end. We've already received a number of great questions in advance, and please feel free to continue submitting more via Zoom Q&A function during this presentation. 2020 is no doubt going to go down as one of the most challenging years in our recent history, both locally and nationally. Even the last few months, we've experienced incredible turmoil. And yesterday, of course, marked the start of a new presidential administration. And like many of you, while I have been deeply troubled by the division in our country, I remain hopeful for our future. It is time for us, San Mateans, regardless of our political leanings, to come together in unity and rally around one of the things that we love deeply: our city, our community. Thinking back this time last year as we were entering the 2020s with so much promise, it is difficult to comprehend just how quickly things changed. The two images on the left are what we were expecting from 2020, and on the right is what we ended up with thanks to the pandemic. But despite everything that we've gone through this past year, I have been personally inspired by our community's resilience. What does it mean to be a resilient community? Well, here's my definition. A resilient community is one that acknowledges our losses and limitations, but also acts both at the individual and collective level to restore and improve our quality of life. It means we come together to support our families, our small businesses, our neighbors, and especially our most vulnerable residents. Here are some photos highlighting some of the ways that our community expressed their resilience and hope during the pandemic. COVID has emphasized the notion that we can't always control what happens, but we can control how we respond. And this idea is going to be an ongoing theme throughout this presentation. Every San Mateo family has been affected by this pandemic in one way or another. Many families had one or more members lose their jobs, and that left families struggling to pay the rent or their mortgage. If you're lucky enough to still have your job, and are able to work from home, you may find yourself also having to be a teacher's aide and tech support for your children in their virtual classrooms across the hall. The photo in the upper right is my son in his virtual classroom next door to my home office. Those among us who don't have the option of working from home have had to make difficult choices out of financial hardship, stop working, or face greater exposure to this virus. Grandparents, including my mother here in San Mateo, have had to experience the pain of being away from their families for prolonged periods of time, and many have lost loved ones only to have had the pain of that loss compounded by not being able to grieve at memorial services in person. Many of our small businesses have faced extreme uncertainty since last March. Just when things appeared to be improving, the necessary strict health restrictions came back, and this cycle repeated itself several times. Businesses often had to make the painful decision to reduce work or hours, or even furlough or lay off employees as business survival came into question. Some businesses that took decades to build have lost everything, and we are already seeing some of the aftermath as many beloved San Mateo small businesses have already closed this year. The pandemic has significantly impacted our city's finances in many ways. Residents have been forced to stay home and watch their expenses, which in turn has led to less local spending and less associated taxes collected. Business travel dried up, leading to corresponding drop in hotel taxes, and commercial real estate market also lost steam, leading to a drop in transfer taxes. And also, of course, we've had to make some unplanned expenditures to manage the impacts of the COVID pandemic. Here is a graphical depiction of what COVID's impact would be on our finances if we didn't take any action. Our expenses are represented by the red line and our revenues by the green line. And you can see the steep drop in revenues, which were down a total of nearly $14 million year over year. And this drop, in conjunction with our expenditures continuing to rise, would have led to our city completely depleting our rainy day fund, which was about $54 million pre-pandemic, in just a couple of years if we did not take immediate action. So why does this matter? Well, about 85% of our general fund comes from tax revenue, and this year, $137 million in expenditures is what it takes to fund core city services, from responding to 911 calls, to repaving our streets, to maintaining our parks and libraries. These services contribute to our city's high quality of life. And when the pandemic hit and our tax revenues dropped, it was essential that we act quickly and decisively, and act we did. The first thing we did was to focus on stopping the bleeding. Our initial action was to aggressively slow or defer spending. We initiated a hiring freeze for many vacant positions, and this saved us $2.4 million. And city staff also generated another $1.4 million in operational savings. We also opted to defer spending on a couple of discretionary spending items. For example, deferring additional payments that the city had been making to pay down our unfunded pension liability. And we drew $2.6 million from our rainy day fund to cover the remainder of the deficit from the 2019-2020 fiscal year. As a member of the City Council and now as your mayor, one of the things I am most proud of is how disciplined we were with spending during the good financial times. And this allowed us to build up a strong rainy day fund, which is now enabling us to weather this storm. While short-term strategies were helpful in mitigating our initial losses, we knew the impact of the pandemic was going to create longer-term structural problems. And this means ongoing expenses were going to exceed what we were bringing in. As such, we needed to come up with several long-term strategies that would allow us to return to fiscal stability over time. And there are three core strategies that make up our long-term plan. And the first is to negotiate compensation concessions from our employees to achieve 3 million in annual savings. City services are provided by people. 70% of our service costs comes from personnel. And that makes sense if you think about it. And we're fortunate that our city staff recognize our financial challenges, and we're making good progress in negotiating modest compensation concessions from our employees. The second strategy is achieving $1 million in annual savings by removing certain vacant positions permanently. And the third strategy is to look at potential revenue enhancements. And that's a fancy word for saying that we're looking for ways to increase our revenues any way we can. We've already made great strides in this area thanks to you, the voters who approved increasing our hotel tax this past November. But more revenue enhancements and other opportunities for long-term savings are under evaluation for future council consideration. Okay, after taking into account these strategies, we now forecast that our city will return to structural balance in approximately 5 years. While that is good news given the severity of the pandemic, it is important to note that we still face significant uncertainties going forward. And first and foremost is our unfunded pension liability, which is over $250 million, or well over $2,000 per San Mateo resident. To pay this down, our pension contributions are going to have to increase significantly, about 80% over the next decade. Other uncertainties include how long it will take for our economy to recover. But overall, I want to emphasize that we were prepared for an economic downturn and we have weathered the storm well so far. We didn't have to lay off any of our employees, and we were able to maintain the services that our community relies on. While we could not control the economy or the global pandemic, we could control how we responded. On March 16th, the very day the shelter-in-place order went into effect, we opened a multi-agency emergency operations center. Staff acted quickly to secure personal protection equipment for all police officers, firefighters, and wastewater treatment plant operators. We had to act fast to move many city services online after having to close city facilities. And we had to expand our communications to ensure the community was informed with the latest health directives. After the City Council proclaimed a local emergency, our city responded swiftly to meet the needs of the community by issuing emergency funds towards rental assistance, small business grants, and support for childcare providers. We also allocated $1.3 million in federal funding to those most in need in our community. And this included almost $1 million towards rental assistance and $300,000 to support childcare, which is a critical need for so many San Mateo families. We also allocated over $400,000 in city funds towards small business assistant grants to help our local business owners who were significantly impacted by the pandemic and shutdown. And additionally, our business outreach task force made over 1,500 calls to local businesses to ensure that they were well aware of all of the federal and local loan and grant programs that were available to them. San Mateo businesses ended up receiving nearly $325 million in federal COVID assistance funds, and no doubt that large number was due to that outreach effort. We created supportive programs for our aging population. Our Parks and Recreation Department, along with community volunteers, established a senior meal delivery program serving over 6,500 meals. They facilitated a grocery shopping service for more than 40 seniors who were at higher risk of contracting COVID if they left their home. And we know how isolating this time has been, so we have made over 1,400 wellness phone calls to the many residents who we would normally see at our senior center. Our city partnered with local schools to create in-person learning centers for our most vulnerable residents. And we transformed the King and Beresford recreation centers into classrooms to provide students with a safe learning environment, tutoring assistance, and access to reliable internet, all so students could attend distant learning. We also coordinated with the county and community CERT volunteers to expand COVID testing in some of our most at-risk neighborhoods, such as North Central. Despite facilities being closed, we created new recreation and library programs, including a new virtual recreation center, summer camps that were held outdoors at our parks, curbside pickup of library materials, a Chromebook cafe that provided drop-in access to computers and printers outside the main library, and new online library programs such as a family story time, Girls Who Code, and Project Read adult literacy tutoring. With every challenge comes opportunity, and we were determined to take advantage of as many opportunities as possible. And here are a couple examples. We made portions of B Street auto free, something we have been talking about for years. And this helped us reclaim more public space for our community, creating a lively, pedestrian-oriented corridor in our downtown. And you might be able to spot in the upper left photo, there's my family enjoying lunch on B Street one afternoon this past summer. And we facilitated outdoor dining for restaurants by providing nearly 45,000 square feet of parklet space. And the resulting outdoor dining has been a huge hit with customers and with restaurants. Over 50 eateries have been participating. And we strategically found areas of the city where we could limit vehicle traffic and have streets open to pedestrians to provide more space for residents to recreate in their neighborhoods. And this is a photo that I shot of my son while we were taking advantage of a closed street in Bay Meadows, and we have never felt more safe while biking throughout San Mateo. We must find ways to recreate that experience post-pandemic. It is important to point out that we certainly could not have gotten through this pandemic without the invaluable support provided by our San Mateo-based nonprofit partners and their volunteers who stepped up to the challenge. I want to thank them, and I want to highlight some of their accomplishments. The Samaritan House distributed nearly $1.4 million to San Mateo residents in an effort to help nearly 1,000 residents remain safely housed. Countywide, they helped over 4,700 people whose jobs were affected by the pandemic. Samaritan House also provided over 2 million meals to hungry families and individuals since the start of the pandemic. 2 million meals. Peninsula Family Service made over $340,000 in grants to San Mateo families in need. They served over 16,000 meals and food boxes to San Mateo families, and Peninsula Family Service provided over 1,600 gifts and essential items to meet the needs of teachers, parents schooling their children, and older adults. And finally, the Police Activities League served over 170 families in need on a weekly basis, distributing over 70,000 pounds of food and essential items. And PAL also supported kids throughout the year by providing at-home activity kits during the summer, over 200 backpacks filled with supplies for back to school season, and over $14,000 in gift certificates over the holidays. As a resilient city, we did not just try to hang on and focus solely on the COVID-related challenges. We also strive to make progress in the important work we had underway long before the pandemic started. COVID demanded many shifts and priorities, but we never lost sight of all the initiatives that are important to ensuring our community's quality of life. We made significant progress on some of the city's most important capital infrastructure projects, and here are a few of them. After years of planning, we began construction on our state-of-the-art wastewater treatment plant and underground flow equalization system. These two projects are major components of our clean water program, the largest capital improvement program in San Mateo's history. And we secured coveted low interest federal loans that will save taxpayers millions of dollars on the total cost of this program. We also began construction on the North Shoreview levee and pump stations, which will protect properties and remove hundreds of residents from the flood zone. And our public works team has also made great progress on a number of neighborhood traffic improvements. We continue to address our housing needs and finalize plans for the city-owned downtown opportunity sites. In partnership with Mid-Penn Housing, this project will bring 225 below market rate affordable homes to our walkable, transit-oriented downtown. And we also cut the ribbon and welcomed residents to Montera, a 68-unit, 100% affordable development in Bay Meadows. In early 2020, we completed the King Park Synthetic Turf Field project, providing a great year-round community recreational amenity. And we also were designated an age-friendly city by the World Health Organization and AARP for our commitment to being a welcoming community for people of all ages. Despite the pandemic and the resulting restrictions, our police department still effectively handled 65,000 calls for service, 65,000 calls. In response to national concerns of over-policing and the unequal treatment of communities of color, the City Council and the community undertook an extensive evaluation of our police budget and policies. Our police department launched a community engagement and accountability initiative called Real Talk San Mateo, and that will continue throughout this coming year. And SMPD is now part of a unique pilot program designed to help it better respond to people in crisis by embedding a mental health clinician within our police department. And this program is in collaboration with the county and 3 other cities. We cannot talk about resilience without touching upon environmental sustainability, one of the most influential factors in how future generations will experience our city. Yes, COVID is taking up a disproportionate amount of our focus and resources now, but we cannot afford to let up at all on our long-term fight against global warming. And we've made some great strides towards greater sustainability and reducing our overall carbon footprint. And here are a few examples. We adopted the 2020 Climate Action Plan update, and as well as building REACH codes mandating all electric new construction. And for these actions, we received the Trailblazer Award from Sustainable San Mateo County. We completed energy efficient upgrades on almost all city facilities, and we greatly expanded the number of publicly accessible electric vehicle charging stations. And we recently completed our bicycle master plan update, which promotes non-auto centric modes of transportation. These accomplishments I just noted are only a small sample of the important work we are doing here in San Mateo. And this is a great time to express my gratitude for the talented city staff that we are so fortunate to have here in San Mateo. Under normal circumstances, our staff does an amazing job on behalf of our community. But in 2020, with all the challenges it presented, staff truly went above and beyond to serve San Mateo. I have no doubt we have weathered the storm as well as we have so far because of our city staff. And I am optimistic about our city's future because our workforce and their dedication to our city. While I can't possibly individually acknowledge all of our employees whose effort made this all possible, I do want to give a special shout out to our team's fearless leader, City Manager Drew Corbett, and extend a warm welcome to our newest department heads. Police Chief Ed Barberini, who joined us in February, Community Development Director Christina Horisberger, who took over the role permanently in October, and Acting Public Works Director Azalea Mitch, who took over just a few short weeks ago. I would also like to thank our outgoing Public Works Director, Brad Underwood, and City Attorney Sean Mason, who is preparing for a well-deserved retirement in New Mexico. And lastly, I also would like to especially thank Samantha Weigel and Jennifer Chen for all their hard work in helping me create this evening's presentation and working out all of the logistics. You had no idea what they had to go through to put this together. Okay, I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about this upcoming year. Our city and community reacted quickly to adapt to COVID to meet the most pressing needs of our community. But we recognize and accept that no matter how well we plan or how many resources we commit, we are still going to face many uncertainties in 2021 and beyond. How many of our businesses will ultimately not make it? How will traffic patterns change? How will the pandemic affect the demand for various types of housing? How lasting or not will the transition to a virtual setting be? The list goes on and on. Being resilient means we will keep a close eye on the changing conditions and remain flexible as we adapt. There are crucial decisions we have to make on the road ahead, but we cannot and will not claim to have all the answers, but we are ready to directly take on these known unknowns. This year will mark the completion of several significant infrastructure projects. We will finish our new Fire Station 25, an important enhancement for our emergency response. We expect our 25th Avenue grade separation project and the new Hillsdale Caltrain station to be completed. Our public works crews plan to repave another 10 miles of our city streets, and we will continue to make great progress on our wastewater treatment plant. And as we revisit our Central Park master plan, we will be collecting more community feedback regarding our crown jewel that is Central Park. I already touched upon a lot of the progress that we have made in terms of sustainability earlier, but we cannot afford to let up at all in 2021. And one critical area of sustainability is how we plan for our future. The coming year will be a pivotal one for our 2040 general plan update, our long-range planning document that will help guide our future growth for the next 20 years. Its importance cannot be understated as it includes how we will plan for housing, parks and open space, transportation, safety, historic preservation, and much more. Community engagement and your input is vital to the success of this multi-year process. More San Mateo residents voted in this past November's election than any other in our city's history, and this is a level of civic engagement that we will need and must strive for in our general plan process. The election did bring to light deep divides within our community as to what are the best paths forward. We can dwell on that division, or we can come together and focus on the common goals that all sides of the debate claim to have. Preserving our long-term sustainability, enhancing our quality of life, addressing housing affordability, reducing traffic and commute times, and maintaining city character, both in terms of our built-out environment and the people who live in our diverse community. This pandemic has had a disproportionate impact on our city's most vulnerable residents. And our collective resilience demands that we view progress through an equity lens throughout this recovery. Late last year, we hosted a community dialogue and training series on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we intend to keep this momentum going well into this year and beyond. To ensure that our city as a major employer is upholding these critical pillars in the workplace moving forward, our city staff created an internal diversity, equity, and inclusion committee. And our city is also participating in the county's recovery initiative, which helps us apply an equity lens to a variety of areas, including health, infrastructure, local business support, education, and more. At a time when so much is changing, we must all keep these equity goals in the forefronts of our minds. Our collective resilience means that we are stronger when everyone, regardless of their age, their race, their gender, or their origins, has the opportunity to recover and ultimately thrive. As unreal as the last 11 months may have seemed, our city has overcome a global pandemic before. A look back at local newspaper headlines during the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic reveals striking similarities to those we have been seeing this past year in the San Mateo Daily Journal. Some of the headlines from back then included wearing masks to become made compulsory, emergency hospital is opened, and preparing food for stricken families. Our city's history has also demonstrated how our collective action and our steadfast commitment to our community makes us resilient. Here are a few headlines from 1919, 1 year later. Cases in San Mateo decline. Influenza takes a big drop. Shows and schools to reopen very soon. I am sure that we will see similar articles this year mirroring that gradual recovery. In fact, we already are, and you can see from a Daily Journal headline below, as you can see from the Daily Journal headline below earlier this month. We're going through a pivotal time in our history, and while much of last year has been focused on taking action to meet our most immediate needs, we cannot lose sight of our path forward. Our resilience necessitates that we consistently work towards improving our future. Years, even decades from now, future generations are going to look back at how we handled the pandemic of 2020. How do we want them to view us in our recovery? It is our time to write that chapter in our city's history. I say the chapter should read something like, though they faced an incredible challenge, the city of San Mateo adapted and became a stronger, more resilient community because they stood together. They recognized how truly interconnected they all were and how their resilience depended on each other. We have all relied significantly on state and local governments these past 11 months. But as we head down what is hopefully the final stretch, we all need to do our part. We must follow our health leaders' directives to keep our fellow neighbors safe. We need to continue to support our local small businesses by shopping locally and buying gift cards and ordering takeout. We need you to get involved in our general plan process. And if possible, we should all consider volunteering our time or donating directly to nonprofits like Samaritan House, Peninsula Family Service, and POW. And perhaps above all, we need your patience as things gradually get back to normal. There is a light at the end of this tunnel. Vaccines are being distributed, and we've learned so much from this experience. Things will indeed get back to normal, and when they do, we will be even more appreciative of the things that we might have begun to take for granted. Sitting with the family and friends, enjoying music at Central Park, getting lost in a great book at the library, block parties with your neighbors, trick-or-treating on our neighborhood streets, Little League baseball games, and so many other activities that make San Mateo such a wonderful place to call home. I hope you'll join me this year in leaning into our inner strength, supporting others when they need a hand, and keeping us resilient on our path to recovery. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mayor Rodriguez. That was a wonderful presentation. I know there was a lot of information in there. I'm Samantha Weigel. I'm the city's communications manager, and I am joined by our economic development manager, Jennifer Chen. So we do want to say thank you to everyone who submitted questions, both in advance and tonight. We did receive quite a few, definitely some specific ones. So as Mayor Rodriguez said, feel free to reach out to him if we don't get a chance to answer your questions tonight. With that in mind, we tried to pick some of the ones that seem to be most common and definitely top of mind for folks. During the pandemic, a lot of us are trying to spend more time outdoors. And our first question has to do with bicycle and pedestrian safety. What is the city doing to expand safe, consistent, family-friendly bike lanes and paths across San Mateo?
Great, thank you for that question, Samantha. Well, I mean, we recently just passed our bicycle master plan. We have an exciting new project underway, the San Mateo Drive Sustainable Streets Project. And this project includes installation of a Class 2 bicycle lane, as well as pedestrian safety improvements, such as curb extensions and enhanced striping. We're really trying to make a more concerted efforts of any time where we have a construction project going on. We're trying to look into ways we can include improvements that will help cyclists. We have a new Safe Streets San Mateo campaign, which is looking to engage in educating their community drivers, bicyclists, and pedestrians and on how they can make our streets safer. And because it's going to take all of us to move that needle. And you know, I sense a frustration among our public that we're not able to move faster on our bicycle master plan. And I'm frustrated too. Funding continues to be an ongoing challenge. There's no doubt about that. And we're gonna have to redouble our efforts to work and secure more grant opportunities and just try to do the best we can in there and look for other opportunities that we can as we're doing construction projects. And I think that that's about, given our current situation, that's about the best we're going to be able to do for now.
Thank you, Mayor Rodriguez. Several people before the meeting started had sent a question about Measure Y. So the next question is about Measure Y passed by a narrow margin last November. What are the next steps for the General Plan 2040, and how do we ensure a fair and quality outcome for all? How can the city balance concerns for all residents in the city?
Those are several questions packed into one. Well, first, let me just say, you know, Measure Y may have passed by a narrow margin, but we must and will respect the will of the voters. As I mentioned earlier, we do have a divided community. There's no doubt about it. But I do think it is important for us to focus on the many things that most members of the community agree upon. The need to address affordable housing, the need to address traffic congestion, the need to protect our quality of life, and all that things. I won't list them all again, but I think it's important to just for everybody to understand that this process is going to take compromise. No one is going to get everything they want in this general plan. That is to be expected. We are a diverse city of 105,000 plus residents. So I guess I think the other part of that question was next steps. Well, earlier this week, actually, we relaunched our general plan process, and council reaffirmed the city staff's plan to gather more information about 3 different alternatives. And I don't have time to get into all the alternatives now, but I would highly encourage you, if you're interested in this, to take a look at our city's website and look at our discussion on this, because it is pretty good discussion, I think. The next step is going to be staff is going to flush out the 3 alternatives, taking into account the constraints of our regional housing needs allocation, or RHNA. It's going to take into account, of course, the height and density restrictions associated with Measure Y. And it's also going to take into account the target study areas that we created around the transit corridors to determine what these various scenarios look like. And let's try to put some numbers to some of our ideas. And then the third component is we're going to be re-engaging the community to get their feedback. And hopefully we're doing that in person as soon as it's healthy to do so. I just can't emphasize enough how important it is that we hear from as many people as possible from our diverse community. This is a top priority for this council this year in getting as much feedback as we can. We need your participation, and we need you to participate civilly and respecting all points of view, especially when dealing with opinions different from your own. To learn more about the general plan process, for that, I would recommend the great website that our staff has put together. It's at www.strivesanmateo.com.
Great, thank you, Eric. So we received a wide range of comments and questions on the topic of policing here in San Mateo. So this next one is sort of a 2-part question on what we do know is an incredibly important topic. What is the police department doing to keep the community safe and address gang activity? And then secondly, how do you and the police department plan to address ongoing racial and social justice issues?
Okay, thank you for that question, Samantha. The first part, SMPD works collaboratively with San Mateo County Gang Task Force and with state and federal authorities. And we also have a crime reduction unit and gang specific task force that works with apartment complex managers and homeowners to try to stop gangs. And this includes a lot of different activity, including, of course, violence, but also things like graffiti and quality of life issues. And we try to have high visibility enforcement and passing checks and things like that. Another really important component that I think gets overlooked sometimes is that we also focus on prevention. And this includes critical programs for our youth provided by the Police Activities League that I spoke about earlier. We're trying, or that organization is trying to keep kids in school and out of the system. So the second part of the question was regarding racial justice? Or
Yes,
social justice?
that's correct. The second part was, how do you and the police department plan to address ongoing racial and social justice issues?
Thank you. You know, our we have one of the best police departments in the Bay Area, if not the country, and our officers take great pride in serving and being responsive to our community. Following the social unrest in response to the racial justice concerns this past year, they launched, I think I spoke about a little bit in my presentation, Real Talk Community Dialogue series that will continue this year. But they've also really put an emphasis on and prioritized transparency and accountability. In addition to what we talked about earlier, they responded to the 8 Can't Wait campaign and are setting up a data page that includes all this great information that anybody can access. I think it's like crime mapping, calls, how many calls of service were there, internal affairs investigations, use of force incidents, and workforce diversity, and all these different things that now it's going to be open for anybody, any member of the community to view. Continuing to prioritize training and de-escalation and officer wellness programs and things like that, and making sure that we're recruiting the best candidates who we can, that also that we can get, and also have diverse backgrounds. That's another important component. One other thing is just keeping strong ties with different community groups. And I know that SMPD has strong ties with local NAACP, leaders in the faith community, and other stakeholders. So.
Thank you, Eric. So we've received a lot of questions related to store closings, and a lot of our residents are just very concerned about storefronts. So the general question is, what has the city done to keep storefronts filled and small businesses running? And how are the city's small businesses doing?
Okay. As I touched on the presentation, small businesses are struggling. There's no other way to put it. And so much of the quality of life experience of living in San Mateo depends directly or indirectly on our small businesses being healthy. And anytime you ask somebody what they love about San Mateo, you know, they might first mention the library, the park, but it also comes down to visiting our downtown and other small businesses in our city, and they're very important to our city. One of the most frustrating things about being on a city council is when you're just limited by the budget that we have. And especially in this time, our budget is just stretched so thin because we're trying to keep our libraries operating, filling our potholes and managing our parks and treating wastewater and all that thing. So we got to look for ways that we can help small businesses that's other than just making direct payments, which I'm sure that they would appreciate. We try to do things like relaxing regulations to help businesses operate like outdoors. And for example, recently we enacted a plastic utensils ban, but we decided to postpone the start of that 6 months later than the rest of the county, just to give restaurants a little bit extra buffer to not make things any harder on them than they already are. Like I mentioned, we spent over $180,000 in city funds to create outdoor dining for our restaurants. And there's no doubt that they would not have been able to do that on their own. We helped connect businesses to $325 million in federal assistance. And this was done, we got more money than all of our neighboring cities because our hard work of you, Jennifer, leading this effort, calling all these businesses just to make sure they knew of everything that was available. It's being kind of scrappy, trying to make sure that although we can't provide the funds, we can help you get these funds. So we've been trying to do that. $325 million may not still be enough to save our local businesses, but we're hoping that it's like a lifeline to have them hold on until more help can arrive, hopefully soon. I think it was about storefronts. There's part of this about storefronts. Nobody wants empty storefronts. This is a good question. It's a timely question because next month, I think our next city council meeting, we're going to hold a study session where we're going to be discussing downtown retail and how our storefronts are used and what are our regulations on what they can be or can't be. And we want to figure out how do we keep our downtown lively and address how e-commerce has changed retail. And this was long before COVID. I just will make a little plug in that the city may be limited in how much money we have to spend directly to help our businesses, but each one of you listening to this can help. We can shop locally. We can buy we can buy gift cards if the business is closed, and we can buy gift cards if we just want to kind of help businesses, let them know that we don't mind investing a little bit in now when they need it, and we can use the gift cards later. I always like to tell people when they're trying to order takeout, try to skip using DoorDash or Uber Eats and just order directly. And many of them are now delivering, and we give them an extra 15%, and they need it. They need it a lot more than I think DoorDash does. Every little bit helps.
Great, thank you, Eric. That was definitely a very, very timely topic right there. The next one that we have is almost kind of timeless at this point. It has to do with housing and our housing needs. So it's a two-part again. What is the city doing to address the housing crisis, and what, if any, impact do you expect this pandemic to have on our housing needs? What is the city doing to create housing that is affordable to people making some of the lowest incomes?
Thank you. We have been seeing some rents go down citywide recently, and we're pretty sure it's due to the pandemic, but we can't expect that to last. We've been contracting with economic experts, and they tell us that they do not think the pandemic is going to have a lasting long-term impact on our housing needs. But the truth is that we do not know for sure. This is the part where we're going to need to be adaptable moving forward. But most immediately, we're urging the state to pass laws that will continue eviction protections for those impacted by COVID. And another important component of this is also providing financial relief to landlords, especially small mom and pop landlords, because they're too also affected. If a tenant can't pay and the landlord is depending on those funds to in turn pay off the mortgage, or if they're on fixed income retirement, they are hurting too. So we're trying to address all parts of this equation. We're hoping the state can help us there. In our new housing element, we are expecting to plan to increase our housing capacity by 7,000 new homes, and we'll probably have to plan for more than that as a buffer as part of our RHNA allocation. Recently our city council has adopted stronger inclusionary housing policies, requiring for-profit developers to include more affordable units in their projects. And in my presentation, I touched upon 2 projects that we're very proud of and looking forward to completing. One that's already completed is the Montera project in Bay Meadows, which offers 100% affordable units. And the other one is now, its official name, I think it's Kiku Crossings, and that's the downtown former Kinko's lot. And that is gonna have 225 affordable homes. It's not easy to get these built. It requires land. It's a very scarce commodity, but we're really excited that we're gonna get these online, and it's one of our council's top priorities. We're gonna continue to look for opportunities to promote affordable housing.
Thank you, Eric. Wow. it's hours. An hour has gone by already. I know you want to get back to your son Taylor and your wife. The last question we have tonight is about train noise. What is the status of the city's effort to reduce train horn noise?
You know, we are very lucky to have access to Caltrain, but train noise is just one of these problems that I think it affects the majority of San Mateans. I personally live over a mile from the tracks, and I'm often woken up in the middle of the night, especially if we have our window open. We hear those noises, and I can't even imagine how it must be if you live in Hayward Park or another nearby neighborhood. It's a big problem, and it's a frustrating problem because the city doesn't have that much control over dictating what trains can do or not do. The Federal Railroad Administration requires that these trains honk their horns for safety purposes anytime they go over a kind of a at-grade crossing. We are very excited about our new 25th grade separation project, which we expect to be completed this year, as I mentioned earlier. And it's vital into meeting these federal requirements because when a train is now getting to not have to go at grade, and we also have the elevation of the tracks at the 28th and 31st Avenues, it means there's going to be less train noise to our city. And these grade separation projects, they cost over $200 million, and they are very, very difficult to get completed. They take decades to complete, and we're unfortunately, I don't see us getting more anytime soon. But what we are trying to do is working on a project which we call creating quiet zones in other areas, like closer to our downtown. And these are safety improvements that we can make to intersections, such as adding things like concrete barriers or street closures or upgraded crossing gates. And these allow the train to not use the horn. They allow the trains to not use the horns as widely as they have been. These two are also costly, not nearly as costly as grade separations, and they also require federal approval and coordination with Caltrain, which is a lot of hoops to jump over. But we really don't have a choice. If we want to address this, we got to keep working at it. Public works staff is working to identify more funding sources, grants, and different kinds of engineering solutions. And that is just, we just got to keep doing that, and we got to figure out ways to do that better because it's a big problem. It doesn't seem like it's big compared to all these other things that we're talking about, but I know it affects so many San Mateans.
Okay, great, Eric. We're at about 7 p.m., so I definitely want to thank you for your time tonight. Thank everyone for attending. I think there was a lot of great information there. Hopefully we answered, at least some of the questions that we received. We will be sharing a recording of tonight's State of the City presentation on our YouTube channel, so please feel free to share that. This, again, was a great turnout. We had over 250 people actually watching live tonight, which is far more than we probably could have accommodated in our Oak Room, although I know we would all like to be in person at the library. So we're definitely, excited that folks are engaging in what's going on here in San Mateo. And for everyone out there, if you want to stay informed and hear about what's going on in the coming year, please consider signing up for our e-newsletter. And you can do that at www.cityofsanmateo.org/e-news.
Thank you again, everyone. And please feel free to email me anytime about anything I presented here. If you have additional questions, I'd be happy to speak with you about anything. Please stay healthy and stay safe.